What's in a name? A name is identity, a way to know who you're talking to, what you're talking about. Some of us identify with the name we've been given, some of us change it. Some names have intrinsic meaning, or are remembering a grandfather. Some names have been chosen for a reason. And yet, for sure, no name has more meaning than the name of a pope. The Catholic Church is a representation of tradition, the most ancient institution in the world. And so when a pope is elected and chooses a name, it means something. But what does it mean? In some cases, understanding it is easy. John Paul II, only one before him. Francis I, only Saint Francis to talk about. But with the latest election and the rise of Pope Leo XIV, we have 13 popes to go through to understand. Now, not all of them are gonna be relevant to understand why the name was chosen, and yet, knowing them all helps. And this is what we're gonna do today. So without further ado, here's every Pope Leo ever. The first man to name himself Leo as Bishop of Rome did so at a moment when the world seemed to be collapsing. It was the year 440 AD. The Western Roman Empire was on the brink of extinction. Emperors rose and fell at a staggering pace. Germanic tribes poured across frontiers. Cities that had once been fortified bastions of Roman order were now in ruins. In the midst of this turmoil, Leo was elected. Born in modern-day Tuscany, he would later be remembered not only as a pope, but as one of the most towering figures in Christian history. Leo didn't come to power as a passive shepherd. He was a Roman aristocrat, an administrator, trained in diplomacy and theology. Even before his papacy, Emperor Valentinian III had sent him on missions to reconcile warring generals, proof of his political skill. From the very start, Leo had a very progressive way to look at the papacy. Progressive in the sense of the word that could be applied to the 5th century. He saw the Bishop of Rome not as a local bishop, but as a universal authority, a voice above emperors and kings, unifying and balancing. Now, since this video is about all of the Leos and not just the first, we're going to go through his life quickly. And there are two particularly important moments to know. One of Leo's greatest contributions came in the realm of theology. At the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, the church was being torn apart by fierce debates over the nature of Christ. Some debated he was entirely divine, others a blend of divine and human. In the midst of this confusion, Leo sent a letter known as the Tome of Leo. In it, he declared, "For each form does what is proper to it in communion with the other, the Word performing what pertains to the Word, and the flesh carrying out what pertains to the flesh." This was a clear, elegant, and orthodox way to put the debate to rest. Christ was fully divine and fully human, two natures in one person. The council accepted Leo's proposition with thunderous approval. "Peter has spoken through the mouth of Leo," was said at the time. It was a moment of triumph. Leo had asserted not only doctrinal truth, but also the primacy of Rome, tracing its authority back to Saint Peter, the first bishop of the city. In this moment, Leo wasn't just offering theology, he was laying the ideological foundation for papal supremacy. After all, Peter has spoken through the mouth of Leo. But if this was Leo's victory in doctrine, what was his victory over the rest of the world? Just a year later, in 452, the so-called Scourge of God, the man who had pushed the Germanic tribes toward the Roman Empire, Attila the Hun, marched into Italy, burning and pillaging as he came. Roman legions were too weak to stop him, and an impotent imperial court turned to the church. Leo, now the only functioning authority in the West, rode out personally to meet Attila on the field. We don't know exactly what was said, no transcript survives, but remarkably, Attila withdrew after the meeting. Roman chronicles claimed that Attila saw a vision of Saint Peter and Saint Paul, swords drawn behind Leo's shoulders, and dared not advance. It may have been diplomacy, plague, famine, or a payoff that turned Attila back. Most probably a combination of these factors, but even if external things are obviously influencing Attila's military movement, it is impossible to deny that the meeting was important, since the change happened right after it. To the public eyes, Leo's presence alone saved Rome. In an age of chaos, Leo became a symbol of Roman continuity, not military but spiritually. Only 3 years later, in 455, when the Vandals came to sack Rome, Leo once again met out with their leader, Genseric. This time, the sack could not be stopped, but Leo managed to negotiate a reduction in violence. No slaughter, no burning churches. Again, the Pope did what no emperor could. So to summarize, what's in a name? Leo the Great was the first pope to articulate the idea of papacy as a global spiritual monarchy, a vision that would define Catholic identity for the next 1500 years. He elevated the authority of the Bishop of Rome far above his peers in the East, not rooting it in imperial favor but in apostolic succession from Peter himself. He centralized power in Rome, asserted control over appointments in Gaul and Spain, appointments of bishops, that is, and frequently intervened in regional church affairs far beyond Italy. His letters became blueprints. His sermons became doctrine. His actions created the idea that in times of imperial failure, the Pope remained standing. And when he died in 461, Rome still stood. In 1754, over a millennium later, Leo I was declared a Doctor of the Church, one of the only 37 men and women to hold that title. To this day, only 2 popes in history are called the Great. The second is Gregory I, but Leo was before him. Now you can imagine that the name Leo became a heavy crown to bear, and so nearly 2.5 centuries passed before another pope would dare to bear the name. The second Leo would inherit a very different Rome, no longer the capital of an empire, but a city in limbo, caught between the fading shadow of Byzantium, the rising threat of Islam, and the turbulent birth of medieval Europe. Leo II was not Roman but Sicilian, a rare origin at the time, reflecting the increasingly Mediterranean character of the Church. Elected in 682, his reign lasted barely a year. Yet, it was packed with theological significance. His main task was to ratify the decisions of the Third Council of Constantinople between 680 and 681. This council had condemned monothelitism, the heresy that claimed Christ had only a divine will. The council had also anathematized Pope Honorius I, a shocking moment when the Church condemned a former pope for heresy. Leo II agreed with the council, but added nuance. He clarified that Honorius wasn't a heretic in intention, but failed by fostering heresy through silence. This was more than a clever spin. It was a pivotal moment in church history. Leo II essentially drew a line between personal papal fallibility and doctrinal integrity. Even a pope could err if he failed to actively defend the church. He also worked to restore relations with the Spanish church, translated council documents into Latin for broader dissemination, and promoted sacred music, using his fine voice to chant Mass personally. He died of illness less than a year into his papacy. 2 popes later, another Leo would seize the moment. When Leo III was elected in 795, the papacy was drifting into dangerous waters. The Byzantine Empire still claimed authority over the West, but its hold was weak. The papacy, increasingly isolated and vulnerable to Lombard aggression, needed a new protector. That protector would be Charlemagne. Leo III was not from the Roman aristocracy. Actually, we have a whole video about this specific story. Link should be on the screen right now. He was a self-made cleric and considered to be too close to the Franks by the aristocracy of Rome. In 799, a mob of noble Roman conspirators attacked him in the streets. Leo escaped, fled to Charlemagne court, and returned under the king's protection. In 800 AD, on Christmas Day, in a moment as theatrical as it was revolutionary, Leo crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans in St. Peter's Basilica. This was not a symbolic gesture, it was a refounding of the empire in the West. By placing the crown on Charlemagne's head, without the king's permission, Leo sent a powerful message. The imperial office flowed from the Pope, from the Church, not the Eastern Court. And so time passed. We're now in the 9th century. Rome faced a different kind of threat, not theological or political, but brutally physical. In 846, Arab raiders, likely from North Africa or Sicily, sacked the outskirts of Rome. They didn't breach the city main walls, but they did something unthinkable. They looted St. Peter Basilica, which at the time was located outside the Aurelian walls. It was a profound humiliation. Enters Leo IV, a strong administrator and man of vision. Elected in 847, his response to these terrible facts was to fortify the spiritual heart of Christendom. He built a new set of defensive walls, encircling the Vatican Hill itself. This area became known as the Leonine City, effectively a new quarter of Rome protected by fortifications the Arabs would never breach again. The Leonine City, with of course new walls and new everything, is exactly what you see today, the walls of the Vatican. Following this line of thinking, Leo IV also organized a Christian naval league, a coalition of Italian cities, and achieved a key victory at the Battle of Ostia in 849, repelling another Muslim fleet in what would become one of the earliest Christian naval victories in the Mediterranean. He also rebuilt churches, restored Rome's morale, and strengthened the city's urban identity as a center of Christian resistance in a hostile world. Leo IV died in 855. His tomb can still be seen in St. Peter's. He was remembered as a city father, both in the literal and spiritual sense. Let's now jump to Leo V. He was elected in 903. Leo V's papacy lasted mere months, during what historians call the Saeculum Obscurum, or Dark Age of the papacy, a time where Roman noble families vied violently for control over the papal throne. Little is known about Leo V's deeds, and some sources suggest that he was imprisoned and possibly assassinated by his successor, Christopher, who seized the papacy in an usurpation. Leo V's brief, shadowed reign reflects the deep instability of the period, where popes were often pawns in aristocratic power struggles. Similarly, Leo VI reigned for less than a year in the early 10th century. His time as pope is sparsely documented, and he appears to have ruled quietly amid ongoing factional fighting in Rome. Between these brief reigns of Leos, Leo VII, in 936, stands out slightly for his background as a Benedictine monk before becoming pope. Though his reign was short, only 3 years, and mostly peaceful, Leo VII earned praise in history for supporting monastic reform and promoting peace between rival Germanic kingdoms. His letters show a pope concerned with diplomacy rather than pure politics, a breath of calm in a turbulent age. The story of Leo VIII, well, That's very different. He was one of the most controversial chapters among the Leos. Installed by Emperor Otto I after the deposition of Pope John XII, Leo VIII's reign is often disputed by historians. Some label him as anti-pope because his election was heavily influenced, if not outright controlled, by imperial power, violating traditional papal autonomy. Yet, Leo VIII exercised real power. He excommunicated his rivals, worked to restore discipline in the clergy, and forged a closer alliance between the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire, laying groundwork for the medieval papal-imperial relationship. His reign ended with his death in 965, after which John XIII reclaimed the papacy. We now skip forward to the mid-11th century, and the papacy was broken. For decades, Rome had been under the thumb of local Roman aristocrats, especially the notorious Tuscolani and Crescenzi families. Popes were often corrupt, weak, or even criminal. Some had bought their seats, others were deposed violently. The office of Saint Peter had become, in the word of one contemporary chronicle, a brothel of ambition. But in 1049, that began to change. A German nobleman, and pardon my pronunciation, named Bruno of Egesheim-Dagsburg, was nominated Pope by Emperor Henry III, who sought to reform the Church by ending its corruption and liberating it from Roman politics. Bruno agreed, but only on one condition. He would not accept the papacy from the emperor alone. He would travel to Rome as a pilgrim, and would only accept election by the Roman clergy and people. It was a symbolic gesture, but a powerful one. When he arrived in Rome, the city welcomed him, and he was formally elected Pope Leo IX. He would not rule as a Roman puppet, he would rule as a reformer. And so we have reached another one of the important Leo. Leo IX believed in a papacy that was universal, moral, and above secular control. He launched a crusade not with swords, but with canon law. His first priority was ending the twin scourges of simony, the buying and selling of church offices, and clerical marriage. Both practices were rampant, especially in northern Italy and Gaul. Leo convened synods across Europe, personally traveling from city to city, an unprecedented act for a pope, and publicly deposed bishops, shamed abbots, and even excommunicated powerful nobles. He surrounded himself with brilliant reformers, especially Hildebrand, the future Gregory VII, and Peter Damian, a monastic firebrand whose letters read like thunderbolts. In every city, Leo preached not only purification of the church, but the moral supremacy of the pope over every bishop, even kings. This was something new. Not longer the Pope was first among equals, he was becoming monarch of the Church, an evolution of the theology and diplomacy of Leo I. But Leo IX's legacy, however, is not just one of revival, it is also one of rupture. For centuries, the churches of the East and West had been growing apart, linguistically, culturally, politically. The Eastern Church, centered in Constantinople, still saw itself as part of a Roman Empire under the Byzantine Emperor. The Western Church was drifting toward a Latin papal-centered identity. Tensions simmered over issues like the use of unleavened bread in the Eucharist, a minor problem, one could say, but also with the addition of the Philoque clause to the Nicene Creed, meaning they added "and the Son" to the creed, which the West had inserted without consulting the East. The breaking point came in 1054. Leo IX sent Cardinal Humbert, a brilliant but tactless French reformer, to negotiate with Patriarch Michael Cerularius of Constantinople. The two sides immediately clashed over jurisdiction, customs, and papal authority. Leo died on April 19th, 1054, just as negotiations were failing. But Humbert, acting in his name, stormed into Hagia Sophia and placed papers of excommunication on the altar. The Patriarch responded with his own excommunication. This was the beginning of the Great Schism. Despite this, Leo IX was deeply revered. He was a man of prayer, a lover of Gregorian chants, and a peacemaker every time he was allowed to be. He even tried to reconcile rival factions in southern Italy by personally leading an army, though this ended in defeat and his temporary captivity by the Normans in 1053. Yet, even in chains, Leo retained moral authority. His captors treated him with respect. He continued to act as pope and sign documents from his captivity. He died a year later in Rome, exhausted but unbroken. He was canonized as a saint in 1087, just 33 years after his death. He remains the last Leo to be canonized, and one of the few popes honored both as a founder and a dividing line. We now finally jump forward to the line between medieval times and the modern era. When we hear the name Leo among the popes, two Medicis immediately come to mind: Leo X and Leo XI, both shaping the church in very different eras. Giovanni di Lorenzo de' Medici, born in 1475, was the archetypal Renaissance pope. Raised amid Florence's unrivaled wealth and culture, Giovanni was steeped in art, politics, and humanism from childhood. Made a cardinal as a teenager, his ascent to the papacy at just 38 years old in 1513 was a testament to both his family's power as to his own skills. As Leo X, he transformed Rome into a dazzling hub of Renaissance brilliance. He patronized artists like Raphael, whose frescoes, including the iconic School of Athens, immortalized classical philosophy and beauty. Leo's ambition extended to grand architectural projects, most famously the ambitious rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica, a symbol of the church's glory that would take generations to complete. But behind this spectacle lay a papacy deeply in debt, scrambling for funds to maintain its splendors. To raise money, Leo sanctioned the sale of indulgences, payments believers could make to reduce time in purgatory for their loved ones. This practice, aggressively promoted by his agents, sparked outrage across Europe. In 1517, Martin Luther, a German monk, famously challenged the church by posting his 95 theses condemning abuse like the sale of indulgences. Leo dismissed Luther as mere drunken German, underestimating the firestorm brewing. Leo X's failure to address the spiritual crisis paved the way for the Protestant Reformation, which would irrevocably reshape Christianity. Politically, Leo was no novice. He deftly navigated alliances between France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire, involved himself in the Italian wars, and sought to protect the Papal States. Yet, his indulgent lifestyle and obsession with art often overshadowed the growing religious turmoil. He died in 1521, leaving a church richer in culture but deeply fractured. Nearly a century later, another Medici briefly held the papal throne, Alessandro Ottaviano de' Medici, elected in 1605 as Leo XI. He was a man of diplomacy and moderation. At 69 years old, weary from travel and burdens of office, his papacy lasted only 26 days, earning him the nickname Papa Lampo, the Lightning Pope. Before his election, Leo XI served as Archbishop of Florence and was respected for his balanced theological views and pastoral care. His election occurred amid fierce rivalry among European powers. Spain, France, and influential Italian families all sought to sway the papacy's course. Sadly, exhaustion and illness cut his reign short before he could leave a mark. And now we take another jump to the 19th century. It was a time of great upheaval for Europe and the Catholic Church. The old order had been shaken by revolutions, the rise of nation-states, and the relentless advance of industrialization. Into this turbulent era stepped two popes named Leo, each representing a different response to challenges of modernity. Leo XII, born Annibale della Genga, elected pope in 1823 at the age of 63, he had witnessed the turmoil of the Napoleonic Wars and their aftermath. Leo XII saw his mission as one of restoration, bringing back order, discipline, and a strict adherence to Catholic tradition. He reacted strongly against the liberal and the nationalist movements, threatening the papal states and the church influence. His papacy was marked by rigorous censorship, banning books considered dangerous and cracking down on secret societies like the Carbonari, who sought to undermine papal authority and unify Italy. His severity alienated many, both progressive Catholics and some traditionalists. His rigid conservatism earned him critics who saw him as an inflexible and out-of-touch pope. Those critics noticed that the church needed to evolve. Fast forward to the late 19th century, when the papacy faced new challenges brought on by industrialization and the social inequalities created by hard capitalism, and we find Vincenzo Pecci, elected Leo XIII in 1878, at the age of 68. Unlike his conservative predecessor, Leo XIII was a man of intellect and dialogue. A scholar deeply versed in Thomistic philosophy, he sought to harmonize faith and reason, tradition and progress. His 25 years pontificate is remembered for his intellectual vigor and pastoral sensitivity. Leo XIII revived the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, positioning it as a foundation for Catholic thought that could engage modern challenges. His landmark 1891 encyclical, Rerum Novarum, addressed the pressing social question of the day, defending worker rights, condemning exploitation, and calling for a just balance between capital and labor. This was revolutionary. Leo XIII laid the groundwork for modern Catholic social teaching, emphasizing human dignity, the importance of family, and the state's role in protecting the vulnerable. It was a radical shift compared to the previous conservative position of the Church. At the same time, Leo XIII sought to improve relations with secular governments. He remained firm on core doctrines and papal authority, but encouraged Catholics to participate constructively in public life. Under his leadership, the Church invested heavily in education and scholarship, embraced scientific inquiry, and positioned itself as a moral guide amid the rapid transformations of the modern world. Leo XIII's approach was subtle but profound. Rather than retreating from modernity, the Church would engage it, using reason, charity, and tradition to meet new challenges. His leadership restored the prestige of the papacy and reaffirmed the Church's relevance in an era that was more and more hostile to them. And now finally we find ourselves facing modernity, facing today. Leo XIV. Now it is impossible, of course, to talk about Leo XIV in a historical sense, so let's just talk. Whatever opinion one has about Pope Francis I, it is a fact that he broke new ground in the Catholic Church. And he did in action and with his name. His name, the first of his kind, represented a break with tradition. A new name taken from a very specific saint who himself worked against the Church in some cases. I mean, Saint Francis' story is deeply inspiring, but there is a lot of conflict with established Church. And so, why Leo? The new Pope consciously evokes the heritage of those who bore the name before him, a name that has symbolized through centuries a certain resoluteness and engagement with the crisis of their times, like Leo I charging in to talk with Attila the Hun. But a question rises. What kind of Leo will Leo XIV be? Like Leo XII, who, amidst post-Napoleonic upheaval, sought to restore order through strict adherence to tradition and discipline? Or Leo XIII, with eyes firmly locked into the future? So, what's in a name? Leo I, known as Leo the Great, set the tone. He was a towering figure, standing firm against the barbarian invasions that threatened Rome itself. Leo X presided over Renaissance papacy, a time of dazzling culture but also great crisis. The 19th century Leos provide two different roads ahead. And so again we ask, what's in a name? It's to be a lion in faith, to protect, guide, inspire, to be a bridge between the church-rich past and its unfolding future. In choosing Leo, the new pope declares that he intends to carry forward this legacy. A name for a pope is more than a label, it's a statement of identity, purpose, and hope. It is a legacy to live up to, and a promise to those who look to the papacy for strength and guidance in uncertain times. But this, of course, is just my historical interpretation. We will all have to see what happens, and it's gonna be fun to do so. Now that you know of all the Leos, I hope you enjoyed your time with me, and please let me know, who's your favorite Leo? I'll see you in the comments, leave a like if you want, and well, have a good one.